His greatest instrument, I've since then amended it to be his vocal. His vocal was unrivaled. His range, his clarity, the constitution of his voice. It was in the same shape near the end as it was in the beginning of his career. He never did anything in alternate keys that I know of when I was there, because I always know what key he was in, and I'd be like, oh, B flat, he might be headed for Purple Rain, or I would know where he was going by what key he was in. He didn't alter his keys. It was effortless. His falsetto was present and very strong. That guy's vocal was perfect. This is Scottie Baldwin, and you are watching Musicians Reveal with Joe Kelley.
Welcome to Musicians Reveal. Joe Kelley here for an outstanding chat we're going to have with a premier front of the house sound engineer, Scottie Baldwin from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is well known for being the sound engineer in concerts with Prince, Madonna, Earth, Wind & Fire. And for the last few years, he's been with the best performers out in Asia. We catch him on a brief break, ready to go back to Asia in a little while. Scottie Baldwin, welcome to Musicians Reveal.
Joe, I'm jet lagged, but I will keep it together for an hour and a half here or so, just to make sure I don't hit the wall here. I'm on one of these 5-day home trips from Asia, and I do a lot of those where I'll go back and forth, and I'm in Asia for a week, and then I'll come home for just 5 or 6 days, and it can be brutal. But I'm up and I'm ready to go. I love your podcast, so I'm excited.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, you've been a big part of our live with all the great sound with some great artists, including Prince. Mm-hmm. And back home, and what do you do when you're not music focused? When you get back home, reacquaint yourself with the family, I'm sure, is first and foremost.
Of course, my wife and daughters. There's all sorts of family time to have, and the time that I can't be spending doing that when I'm gone, I make up for it when I'm home. It's summertime now in Minnesota, so it's nice. I love to go up to the Boundary Waters canoe area and do solo trips and family trips up in there, and then that's where I get to get divorced from all of the music industry, and I don't even bring my phone in there. We just go in for a week and come out with paper maps and take it all in there and just paddle and portage my way to the middle of nowhere and look at the Milky Way. Just stare up at the Milky Way. Yeah. I think it's refreshing and resetting. So that's one of the things I like to do.
Yeah, it's a beautiful state. So, are you originally? Did you start out playing music, or was it first into the technical side?
It was a little of both. I was inspired by Eddie Van Halen, as were a lot of people who are in their late 50s. We saw Eddie play or heard him play and just thought, what is he doing? And I got into guitar, and I found out I didn't have much aptitude for playing guitar, but I was good at guitar teching, and I was very adept at taking guitars apart and routing necks and adjusting action and intonation. And so I worked for a couple of bands in Minneapolis before Michael Bland, of course, from Prince fame, kind of discovered me and said, hey man, will you just go on the road with me? At first, to set up his gear, he was such a busy session and a gigging drummer in Minneapolis that I started by just basically being Michael's in-town tech. But it was only a few months before I was at Paisley Park and sitting behind Michael as he played and setting up sessions for Prince. And then the next thing you know, Michael's like, do you want to go on the road? Yes, I do. And that turned into 4+ years as Michael's drum tech. And all the while, Joe, I was learning sound in concert, kind of at the same time as I was setting up drums. And I learned how to run sound, and I would apply the principles that I would learn being in the room with Prince. He would talk a lot about sound, and he would talk a lot about arrangement and live arrangement and how it differs from studio arrangement. And I would just sit back behind Michael and just sort of soak all this in and memorize all these things, just kind of compartmentalize all these sayings he had and file them away. And then I was able to pull those out later and use them in my sound career. So I still use architectural tenets and principles that I learned from sitting behind Michael Bland for 4+ years behind the drums.
And you couldn't meet a nicer guy, Michael Bland, and
a true master, at what he does, a leader in his field. And when you're around, it takes a fair amount of humility, but when you're around great people who are great at what they do, if you just sit back long enough, and you'll learn, there's so much to learn just by example. It doesn't need to be taught. It's taught by example. And all the discussions that Michael and I had on the gig and in the studio, and things I would ask him or things he would ask me. And I was kind of learning about myself as well, and my proclivities and interests. And Michael, great people like that sort of pull it out of others around them. And you can't help but get better when you're around people like Michael and like Prince.
How about for past drum techs? Did you talk to Brad Marshall up before the gig?
No, I haven't. I've never had much interface. Brad and myself, our overlap was very short. I think it was during the Diamonds and Pearls tour, I believe.
Okay.
Was our overlap, where I was starting to do all the acoustic stuff and Brad was setting up for Michael, but he was mostly on electronics back then. And then so Brad and I had very little overlap, and I haven't kept in contact with. I'm unplugged from all social. So when people say, "Hey, there's a Facebook meetup or there's an Instagram meetup," or there, I've gone the other way, and I've sort of, I don't know when it was, 4 or 5 years ago, because I've been exclusively in Asia for 7+ years now. A lot of that isn't allowed over there, and trying to run a VPN, they kind of catch up with the VPNs and shut them down. Yeah. So at some point I just kind of gave up with, and with your experience of being in Asia, even though it was a while back, is I just sort of went, I don't need this and I don't need this. And I sort of got used to not being on social media, and it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah. When I was over in Asia, the only way I would get US news was USA Today. I would buy the paper, and I'm reading it one day, and they said there was a fire at a supermarket. And I was like, my brother worked at that supermarket, and it was an arson job. But, we still have a joke, like somebody burned it down, but that's how I found out.
Your brother's not talking, right?
Yeah, he's not talking. He was up at Boston University for college at the time, but that's his story. But yeah, it's like, but the times have changed, but it's good to kind of branch, shut down. I'm sure it helps, right?
Yeah, it does. There's never been a better time. I think, even though I don't consider myself an overly political person, I'm most of what I take in, ingest, is world geopolitics. If I watch anything when I'm over in China, it's a whole different take on it. So I've seen all sides now. And so I think the safest place is just on the outside looking in. I don't get too wrapped up in all that stuff, but it's a good time to be divested, as far as I'm concerned, in all the social medias, because everyone is in on everything. I mean, I'm still on Reddit. I follow a couple of groups on Reddit, and I've recently been on, can't remember what it's called now, Discord, to follow a canoeing group. But otherwise, no Insta, no Twitter, no Facebook. I've never been on Facebook. I just don't. It's not something in which I'm interested. I'm certainly not techno adverse,
right?
But I just think that's not where I want to spend my time. When I'm home, I really want to keep my focus on my family and what's going on in front of me.
Right. So, sounds good.
That's where I find the balance.
Yeah, I've kind of tried to peel back, because there's just so much out there. I mean, we put announcements out, but we've been putting so much focus on YouTube and Mixcloud. So, everybody's got their recipe.
Yeah. They'll be wrestling YouTube from my cold dead hands. YouTube is where I have the most fun, because I can look up exactly what I want and watch exactly what I want, and kind of control what's volleyed back at me. I kind of defend those things that are just those little quick clips that they try and grab, get you to go a certain way. I try and stay away from all that stuff as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you about, as a drum tech, you mentioned in the studio with Michael Bland and Prince giving you advice. When you transition to drum tech live, what goes into setting up Michael Bland and other drummers?
Great question. Great question, Joe. That's, I learned a lot about the difference between how you tune for a studio session, how you tune for live. Prince taught me the most of that. Michael taught me some, but there was a particular instance where Prince heard me tuning on a Saturday morning. I was the only one at Paisley Park other than Prince, assumedly, because he kind of caught me tuning the sonar kit, and he came in and he said, "Hey, listen, I know you're proud of making those drums ring, but in the live setting, we don't need any ringing in the drums. We just need it to be dull, like a thud, like a Cadillac door shutting." And when he said that, I went, "Oh, I get it. Like, that's a really good way of describing it." So he said, you retune, and I'll come back when I hear you, and I'll take a listen. And I did. And 45 minutes later or whenever, however long later, he came back in and he played the kit. He's like, that's how you should make them sound live. So
Wow.
he knew, he
Mm-hmm.
was a guy who knew what, first of all, Prince always knew what he wanted.
Right.
And if he didn't, he faked it really well.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew how to arrange. I can't emphasize this enough or in enough interviews. Prince knew, he was a master live arranger. He knew how to arrange things live differently than they are in the studio. That's particularly important to me now, because as a front of house engineer of a long list of high end A-list acts, they can afford to bring in all their old tracks
Mm-hmm.
and have them in the playback rig. And often they don't edit those down enough. And then you've got a lot of fighting between drums and the loops that are from a record. And there's a lot of agitation, a lot of things that get things out of focus. The mix can get out of focus, I guess is a good way of saying it. So I'm very experienced at working with programmers and playback engineers and saying, let's take that out. We don't need that. Let's get rid of this, leave that part in, and try and make it really gel together and sound like it's cohesive. And a lot of that came from just listening to Prince and Michael about live arrangement and how to keep things tight and sparse. You want to create pockets of little parts of, you want to create some space in between those notes.
Back when you were doing the tech for the drums, what are some of the things that can go drastically wrong in the middle of a show, and how was Prince afterwards? How did he respond to maybe something going off kilter?
With Michael, I think there was one time when Brad had trouble. The loop got off. Michael started the loop on time. Mm-hmm. The loop stopped or went off or was intermittent, and Brad, I think, had it traced down to a MIDI cable being unplugged. I'm not sure if that was Brad. That was what Brad got back to Prince or needed to get back to Prince, or whether or not something else went wrong. But there are gremlins, and they do occur. That was the only time I saw something go wrong with Michael. We had a pretty good system ironed out. The issue with Michael was because of Michael's size and power and energy, and the fact that Michael hit through the drums basically early in his career anyway. Things would break. He would break cymbals every night. He would have, at the end of a set, he could go through always 20 sticks. Wow. Sometimes it looked like a forest floor, just sticks, shredded sticks everywhere. Wow. And we had to have systems in place of fixing drums, fixing broken kick drum pedals, fixing, and Michael and I sat down and came up with some really creative ways of doing that, along with the electronic tech, Dave Keffer, where we had the sound engineer at the time, the front house engineer. I believe it was Dave Natal back then. We had Dave record Michael's kick drum and give it to us on DAT. And we put a recording of Michael's kick into the sampler and gave Michael one specific pad. I believe it was the lower left pad, the farthest away from him, that always had Michael's kick drum on it. So when Michael hit the real acoustic kick, I hope this isn't too inside baseball.
No.
Michael would hit the acoustic kick, and then he would hit the sampled kick, and we got those to be the same level. So if Michael, and he did, break kick drum pedal chains, mm-hmm. He would just look over his shoulder. I would already know what was happening. He would move his foot and he would start playing the kick with his left hand.
Oh, okay.
And I would reach in and change the pedal out. And Michael and I would rehearse this some mornings. We would rehearse things going wrong. How are you going to fix this? How are we going to fix this? We need a speed clamp on these freehoo cymbals because these are the ones I'm more likely to break. We always had, and like an F1 or an NASCAR pit crew, how they practice their pit stops, Michael and I would practice things going wrong. So we got really adept at being able to fix things quickly so that no one noticed.
Yeah, who was in charge? The Prince's guitar pedals. That's always like if something you got to go out there and you're slipping. I think on Arsenio, one guy grabbed the string of his pedals.
There was a guy named Joe. There was Zeke Clark. There were so many guitar techs for Prince. And they all had their challenges because his idea of what a great guitar tone was changed. Even though if Prince were here, and I always try and talk about it as if he were next to me,
right,
he would probably disagree with that. I know that's not the truth. His guitar tone changed over the years. I happen to like his Batman era guitar tone, like on the song Bat Dance, the aforementioned Bat Dance, where
right.
he had that really fully overdriven tone, but it was very compressed and controlled. I used to like that tone. I think Prince played into that tone very well. He liked heavy distortion, but with a controlled sound. And his guitar techs, every tour, Prince would have a slightly different guitar tone. So his distortion was a little more distorted, or his distortion was a little less distorted the next tour. And I noticed that it was ever changing. And he wanted, even his pedal board that you mentioned, you can find all sorts of pictures of that online. It always housed a round bass stand for his vocals. He never used a boom stand. He always wanted a straight stand, so he could pick it up and they could take the pedal board away and he would still have a straight stand. There were all sorts of requisite things for Prince's performance. The little quick clips had to be pointing a certain way so he could quickly press the thumb button and lift them off. That button always had to be faced the same way as the microphone. So I was very good at making sure that was, over the years of not only being his drum tech, but being his engineer, that all those were set to the right the setting, so that it was easy for Prince to seamlessly go between venues and tours. And it was always the same for him.
Now, you did step aside and went back to work in Minneapolis. You went to work back in the clubs after the drum tech era?
I was constantly working in the clubs when I wasn't on tour, especially mixing. And I was kind of getting my chops down for mixing. And then I got the call. I think I went on tour with Sheila E. And got noticed by an R&B singer named Maxwell, who's gone on to great prominence. And won many Grammys. And Maxwell took notice of me then. But before I did that, I did Seal. Seal was popular in the early and mid 90s. And Seal wanted me to come out and take over on his tour. And I was kind of in over my head, but I had the right attitude for getting it done. And I just never run a systems that big before. And I kind of just took my same approach that I had, which was a little bit guerrilla style, just go in and make it super musical and make it spread things out, get the real estate side to side very well done so that you could hear Seal. And I learned a lot on that tour. I learned a lot about touring itself on that Seal tour, even though I didn't have a great experience personally. Right. Professionally, I learned how to tour. That was big for me. And then once I got going on Maxwell, then it was off and running, because I got noticed by so many artists on the Maxwell tour that I got a lot of R&B gigs off of Maxwell.
That's a pretty quick ascension. All the names are
it was
first tier performers.
Yeah, it was exponential. It was not linear in any way. It was just sort of 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. It just sort of took off, and I went right up to the top.
Did you do the Sheila tour? We saw a gig at Tramps in New York City.
Probably. Was that the E Train? Sheila E and the E Train?
Yeah, Eric Leeds.
Yeah.
That was the strangest as from going to see a concert. We had to sit on the floor right in the middle of the dance floor. The whole thing, people were shouting and everything. I don't know.
Wait, did you say Tramps in New York City?
Yeah, New York City, a club.
Okay, so that was the night it was raining.
Yeah, exactly.
Super
we left and we got soaked.
Yeah, it was raining sideways. Actually, the rain went all the way up to the front door of the place, went up over the sidewalk. And that is the only reason I don't have a good memory for gigs, Joe. The same as if you asked me about the load-in last show.
Right.
Of course, I'm never at load-ins or load-outs anymore. But if you asked me how the hallways looked, I would go, I don't know. I don't remember that stuff. It just doesn't, I don't have that gene. But Tramps, I wouldn't have remembered anything except when I got hired by Maxwell, his manager said, you may not remember him, but he remembers you. Do you remember Tramps, New York City? It was raining sideways and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. And he said, well, he talked to you after the show. He had a little afro and I went, oh my God, I do remember that guy. And he said, well, he remembered you. And he said, it was a great compliment. He said, he never heard people talk nice about Prince. He said, you talked about Prince the way he hopes people talk about him when they're done working with him.
Wow.
And I said, that's a compliment. And so, I do remember that show, Tramps.
Because we got a nice spot in front of the stage, and the people who had tables on the side, sit down. So we're sitting like kindergartners on the floor.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, we used to like
Tramps.
Do you remember Tramps? Did you like working other than the rain coming in?
Is it still there, by the way?
No, they closed down, but at the time
I remember it was sideways. The venue was sideways. They could go in and the venue you played it sideways. You didn't play it front to back.
Yeah, exactly.
Correctly.
Yeah.
And I do remember that being a good room because it wasn't very deep. It was wide, but not deep. And I think they had a pretty decent system in there because I remember having good results on that show. And Maxwell certainly was impressed because he came up and asked for my number and asked for my name for me to write down my name back in the old days when you'd actually write down name and number, and
That's right. Put it in the wallet.
and it paid off. It paid off pretty well for me. I've been going ever since. So
He just doesn't tour as much as people would like, but great performer. Yeah,
yeah, he is.
yeah. Now the big start, the house engineer with Prince, front of the house engineer, was the first tour. I believe I might have seen the fourth show you ever did with Prince in that capacity. Was it the Hit and Run tour in 2000?
It was Hit and Run.
Yeah.
I joined the tour, and they had Prince had two of us kind of running
Okay.
front of house.
Okay.
He was still in this sort of had this shell shock about engineers. So he said, I want Scottie on board, but have him come along. He can do all my effects on my vocals over on the right side of the console. And it wasn't very long before they let that other guy go.
Okay.
And then I took over. I remember leaving in Boston because I got a call that a great bass player, Doug Nelson, from Twin Cities, had been had been killed.
Yeah, I remember.
And so I
that,
left
yeah.
the tour, and that was one of the first shows. And I left, and I came back a week later, and then I was there to stay. And it's one of the few times Prince really showed emotion, but very cold emotion, where when I got back, and he had known Doug as well, and he had employed Doug. Doug was in Margaret Cox's band, MC Flash.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Doug, was a mainstay and part of the Dr. Mambo's combo, which all the Prince fans know as still being there at Bunkers. And when I got back to the tour, Prince walked out to front of house and very coldly set his hand on my shoulder. Didn't cup it or anything, just kind of went, sorry for your loss. And then got up and walked back to the stage as if it was required of him. And
Right.
I kind of laughed as he walked away. I kind of laughed, and I thought, well, that was touching. That was really touching. But, it's something from a guy that you didn't get a lot out of in that way.
Well, obviously he, had his heart for you all these years, going through so many different projects.
We went through a little.
Yeah.
We went through little bouts and stuff. And I know you've had it. I've watched your interviews, and I've seen, Susan talk about it, Monty talk about it. You probably even Michael, but Prince was he was a very focused individual, and focused. It was usually I, me, mine. It had to do with him, his thing, what he was doing. And there was a lot less we, ours, us, as I now spend my entire career in Asia and want to finish my career in Asia. Mm-hmm. Everything over there is we, ours, us, team. Everything's team over there.
Okay.
The West is very much about I, me, mine. Even if you're a front of house engineer, it's like, or you're a monitor engineer, you're a band member, you're an artist. Things are focused way more on self in the West than they are on the greater good. And so I'm much more comfortable in the East. But Prince was definitely an I, me, mine artist, and you had to sort of go along with that and figure out where you were going to get yours, so to speak, within the confines of that being so focused on him.
Yeah, he probably, do you think if he went to a different approach like they do in Asia that you're familiar with now, he wouldn't have accomplished probably half or more of what he put out? Do you think that's true?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he would have done really well. There's no crime against appreciating people for what they are and letting them know how you feel about them. I don't think there's not, it doesn't cost anyone anything to do that. I can already feel the comments negatively toward me saying that it's incumbent upon people to show appreciation when they feel it and when they realize it's happening. It's as Prince once said to a guitar tech, Fred, I forgot his last name, but it was one of Fred's last days. He was leaving, and Fred held out the guitar for Prince. I was drum teching back then.
Okay.
And we all knew that this was going to come, Fred was leaving, and Fred went out there and held the guitar up, and Prince wouldn't step into the guitar, just stared at Fred in rehearsal. And there was this tense sort of pregnant pause. And then Prince finally stepped into the guitar and put it on. And Fred, his last day, his last hour of working, he just went, a thanks would be nice once in a while. and Prince said, your check is your thanks. And I remember going, well, number one, that's true. And number two, it's just heartless and poor leadership. It's just, that's not how good leaders lead. is through fear and intimidation. And we all dealt with that on varying degrees, depending on what your position was. And it is true. Your check is your thanks, but thanks are also thanks. So I find you can do a lot more. You can, what is it? You can catch more flies with honey.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So you just being nice to people and saying, hey, I really appreciate how much you've done. I'm noticing what you're doing. I appreciate your extra efforts, and thanks for being a part of this collective that's helping my career. And you wouldn't believe what that does. And people out there know what it does. It makes you feel like, it makes you realize you're part of a team and that you're appreciated. And even though I'm looked at as a big pickup by these Mando pop artists, Chinese pop music artists, it's like, oh, I have Scottie Baldwin. Scottie Baldwin's mixing my tour. He's got my tour next, and I'm really appreciative of that. But I also don't abuse that. I make sure that I understand that I can't do what I do I can't do my job without a whole host of people. I don't fly until I fly a couple days from now to Beijing,
right?
Where we're playing. JJ Lin, the artist with whom I'm working now, is playing 9 sold out nights.
She put out a new single, right?
JJ did.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if JJ did, but he could have. He's always working on music.
Okay.
JJ's endlessly working on music, and but that's 9 nights at Bird's Nest Stadium. That's 100,000. Capacity is almost 100,000 people.
Wow.
That's 3 weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 9 shows at 100,000 people per show. That's no joke. That PA is already being set up. That stage is already set up. That PA is already hung. I don't even get there. When I get there, all I have to do is plug in my laptop and my, multi-track recording into my laptop and set up my headphones, and I'm good. My system engineer over there doesn't speak English. My Mandarin's very poor, but we communicate. He knows exactly what I want, what I'm looking for out of the system. I can't do it without him. When you have 22, I think we have 22 delay towers in that stadium. That's how massive the setup is. All of those have to be perfectly time aligned, and he knows what EQ I'm looking for. All that is him. So he makes me look good. So, and I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. So I make sure people, I make sure I'm a very grateful person, and I make sure people know when they're appreciated.
Where's the best place to sit in a football stadium if you're a fan?
Right at the front of house. Well, the reason that I always tell people get tickets at the front of house board is because, number one, if you're in the front row, more than likely, not with me mixing, because I try not to do this to people, but you're getting just killed with subs. You've got a bunch of subs. You got maybe 32 subs per side, and these little speakers on top that are supposed to balance that out. In Mando Pop, the sub low is much less prevalent. Okay. I can mix a show with a lot less sub, and I do. It's way more about the vocal pronunciation and making sure that the vocal is inordinately higher in the mix than you would in the West. Like engineers in the West, they go, "Whoa, like you're crazy, you're mixing it like that." But if you don't mix it like that, they get on Weibo. The fans will get on Weibo and say the vocal was, I couldn't hear the vocal. It's just a different mix. I had to learn how to mix. Mando Pop is a whole different thing. So is Korean Pop. Korean Pop's actually a little different than Mando Pop. So learning those mix differences, but still the best place to take in the show is probably halfway back to front of house or at the front of house position. Because then you can, number one, you can see everything. You can see how the lights sweep. You can see these patterns. We've got an incredible lighting director, the most incredible lighting director with whom I've worked. And he's on JJ Lin, and his movements are so beautiful and so sweeping. And we've got a great laser team. It's really worth taking in, and you can't read a book when the book is right up to your face. You've got to get back to be able to see the full page. And that's how I tell people, just take it in from a little ways back.
So you're talking you're talking on the floor by the board?
On the floor. I would always be on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah. You're connected to the sound, the sound is connected to the floor, and so to speak. And so that's where you get the good stereo reference as well. The imaging is best there.
Right. Definitely got to keep that. I'm going to keep that in mind when purchasing tickets next time.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the beginning days, the house, front of house engineer in the early 2000s. I saw the hit and run tour at the Academy of Music in Philly. And I don't know if if you joined it then but anyways, I had a question specifically about the start of the show with Rhonda playing that stand-up bass.
Yes, the Vector. Yeah,
I felt like the bass was going through my heart. What was the technique you used to get that right
well,
there?
um, specifically on bass, and Rhonda had that Vector bass.
Okay.
And it actually for a direct input bass
Okay.
that didn't have the shell and you weren't using the wood, it was just a stick bass essentially. Um, Rhonda had that thing it sounded amazing. That was one of the few times you could just plug the bass in and give it a nice warm sound, or give it a tube preamp, and it sounded amazing. And Rhonda is just that kind of player anyway. Kind of everything that she touched, it always sounded great. And Prince kind of taught me the trick on bass. He said everyone just puts a high pass down at 50 or something, and then they just let the bass, then they compress it. Prince said, let's run the high pass up, keep going up until it sounds like a bass guitar. Don't make it sound like a bass. Make it sound like a bass guitar. Don't forget it's still a guitar. You need to hear all the notes. And Prince's argument is a correct argument in that when you get down on the low E or the D, anything below the fifth fret kind of turns into one note. Unless you kind of carved that out and made sure that you lose the notes down below. They just turn into mush in a venue. They'll record fine. You can hear them in the recording fine. But if you get mushy down there, it gets, so I remember I always used to kind of slightly chop off the bottom of a bass and then just turn it way up. I had to compress it less and it acted more like a bass guitar. Prince did the same thing with kick drum. I used to cut my kick drum off. I still do at 50 hertz, right below where the sweet spot is and where it connects with your chest. Then I just drop it. It's all gone. I don't let any of that through. And so you don't get this double woomphing in a venue. You don't hit the kick and goes, that's gone. My kicks always sound like a Cadillac door shutting, a nice old like 78 Coupe de Ville. You get that nice, you just get that nice. Yeah. There's no double sound. There's no like low end, nothing's rattling, because after all, that's not where the money is in any mix. The money is in the vocal, and the money is in the guitar and the key and the piano, and the money is up in the high mids. That's where all the pronunciation, you want that. And unfortunately, low end can obfuscate some of that pronunciation if it's left unchecked. So keeping a nice tight low end on the bass, like we did on Rhonda on that tour, and like we did on drums, and get very frequency specific about all that stuff. You can really control it, make it nice and tight, and sound full of energy, but doesn't run around a room. It doesn't suck all the air out of the room. And that was one of the keys to that.
Yeah, the funny part, we were waiting in line. I guess it was for us, it was a long sound check because we wanted to get in there. But all of a sudden, there's like a scream, and Prince ran across from the hotel in his high heels into the venue across Broad Street in Philly. And Aaron is, following him in for security.
Chasing behind.
That was funny.
Aaron had a tough job. He had to, because he came on the heels of Trevor and Zachary, and Zachary came back. And got Joey back then, all the Prince security guys. The one that was assigned to Prince always had the hardest time,
right,
keeping up with that guy. Right,
never take your shoes off,
like,
right?
Yeah, like the movie Ronin. You just wake up and in your suit and just throw your shoes on. You're out of there and within a minute.
Yeah, a gig which I've referenced this to people in interviews before, which the Montreal Jazz Festival. The director there, I think on the 25th year anniversary, they asked him, what's the best concert you ever saw? And he said Prince in Montreal at the Jazz Fest. We were there. We were in the second row. You did that show too, right?
I didn't do Montreal.
No, Montreal in Canada.
Oh, Montreal.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was like
Montreal.
2001 maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Before the One Night Alone.
Yeah. I did all of One Night Alone.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm glad I was part of
that.
Yeah.
He did it.
We did a lot of,
we
did a lot of shows in Canada because Prince's wife, Manuela at the time, is Canadian. And so we did like a month in Canada. Where we went up into Canada, we were up there for a month, if I remember right. We did so many shows all the way across Canada and had these beautiful drives from city to city up there. Montreal, for sure. I did that in 2001.
Yeah, that was,
I can't remember the venue.
Yeah, it was Wilfrid Pelletier, Plaza des Arts. It was like a mid-size And
Okay.
it started, Prince had the lights turned off for the first part of the show. It was really
Mhm.
abstract. And somebody even in the crowd yelled, "Wake up." So, and then
Did
there
I
was an
did
intermission.
did I have the low voice? Did he start it?
No, no, it
Did he
wasn't the
start
One
it
Night
with a?
Alone. No,
It wasn't One Night Alone. It was just
no.
some other.
We saw actually the last One Night Alone show that was at the Bell Center where they took the Days of Wild and released it, the 20-minute
Oh yeah,
version.
yeah,
He had the hockey
yeah,
jersey on.
yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I just got that in the mail. Someone sent that to me. I said, "Oh, I don't have. I've only got the box set, the One Night Alone live box set
right.
on vinyl and CD,
Yeah.
and then I had maybe some of the Live from Aladdin Las Vegas DVDs that I'm going to give my daughters." And so someone was kind enough to send me all the discs that I
Mhm.
didn't have. Days of Wild, Hawaii. I think
Right.
there was
Yeah.
controversy from Hawaii. Like because I'm not into bootlegs or any sort of like odd off release. Matter of fact, I don't really collect anything at all.
Mhm.
So that was nice to be able to send that to me, and I'm able to give that to my daughters because as a live engineer, there's not a lot I can say I did. Like I did this. Like, can you hold it? Oh no, it disappears in the air,
Yeah.
right? And I just throw my backpack on and walk away. But it's nice to be able to have done stuff where Prince appreciated it enough to release it and then let me, say, hey, ask me, can you write something for the release of this?
Yeah. Right.
And that's a big deal, right? That's
Yeah.
I didn't
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't I didn't fully realize it then, but I do now how important that is. And how much that was his sign of appreciation of like, you were responsible for this. Why don't you write something about how you did it? And to be able to still hold it now and hear it on Spotify. I can go on Spotify and listen to somewhere I created a playlist of everything that I had mixed live that was released. And
Okay.
it was a long list. I didn't think it would be that long, but they're like, oh, I did that too. And I did that. And that's all really brave of Prince because that was right from the front of house console. Duran Duran did the same thing with a Japan box set of mine that I mixed, and they were like, "This is good enough to release. We're just going to release it." That's a hard to find one, but it's nice to be able to do that. That's pretty
Yeah.
brave.
And if people, the book you open, you'll see Scottie's words right there detailing his
Mm-hmm.
experience on the tour. And,
Yeah,
he was really happy with that from you, right?
yeah, he
Obviously.
was.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and again, that's about it, the best thanks. I mean, there were. Don't get me wrong, and I don't want it to be. Hopefully, people can see this interview and see it in its entirety and say that, not say that I was ungrateful. Prince did. There was a particular time where I think he had a glass or two of wine that he pulled me outside in L.A. After the Leno show, I think, and we were at I forgot the name of the place. I always forget the name of the place, but he pulled me outside there, and he was talking about the box set, and he was saying how he's like, Scottie, you get it. See, you get it. Not a lot of people get it. We get
Mhm.
it. We're from Minneapolis, and when I wrote, he said when I got what you wrote, because he called me the next day and asked me if he could take one line out of that essay I wrote. And I said, okay. And he said the line and I went, okay. And it still worked. So that was kind of cool that he permissed he had me permiss that. But then when it was released, he pulled me outside in LA and he said, I read what you wrote. And I said, oh, he gets it. And then I read it again and I said, no, he really gets it. And then I read it a third time. And then I said, he's one of us. He's a band member. He really gets it. And that's what that's but believe me, that's about as great a thank you as you could get from Prince. And I really do appreciate that because he
Mhm.
didn't often take a lot of time to reflect and thank people for things. But when he was grateful, it was usually financial,
Right.
transactional, a thank you.
Yeah.
But in this case, he took the time, whether or not it was the red wine talking or not. But I think sometimes that's a little bit of a truth serum.
Right.
Certainly I don't downplay the history of alcohol and drugs in the creation of art
Mhm.
in the past. It's a very important part of the past. So I think that was a nice little window that he had that he decided to thank me on that. So I won't forget that.
And that correct me if I'm wrong, but he did Everlasting Now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. That's always one of my favorites to go in there. I mean, that sums up the style of Prince, a little bit of everything. You did a great job
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
I totally agree with that because the thing is Prince did a lot of important work around that time.
Mhm.
And he did a prolific amount of recording, or a prodigious, I should say, amount of recording in the early and the 2000s, where he wasn't as popular as he was before, but he had so many good messages and adroit and on the mark messages in his music. You have to search through some cruddy stuff too. There's not everything is gold, but when you pull those nuggets out, a song like The Everlasting Now is really important, and it's very it's one of those that a true Prince fan will understand what I mean when they say there are certain songs that really are speaking, and they speak throughout time, and they still speak today.
I think Dwayne Tudor told me he was in the audience during that show. He said, yeah, it was incredible too live. I mean, probably better than watching on TV. Yeah.
To be enveloped. That's what, you hear occasionally, Joe, the people will say, oh, I never saw Prince live. I never got a chance. It was really special to see Prince live because we never knew what was going to happen. We kind of had an idea of the set list, especially at like a show as big as 2004 Musicology. We kind of had to stay with the set list.
Right.
He would deviate occasionally, but you had people going up and down and a lot of motion under the stage as well. So you kind of had to stay on a schedule. You couldn't just riff the whole thing. But as far as what he would play during the acoustic section, what extra song he was going to do, the after parties for sure, the after shows, they were so extemporaneous and so in the moment that it's hard for one to really appreciate it unless they were there and truly enveloped in the feeling of what it's like to be surrounded by, especially how great Prince fans are. I mean, I still count them amongst the best fans in music history, because when they really love an artist and get around an artist, they know how important that artist is. And when they're in a room and that artist is filling that room with their art and you're in the center of it, it's really, man, that can be transformative.
Where were you situated on the Musicology tour?
I was always at either in the back, because that was a theater tour, more or less.
Yeah, we saw it in Jersey.
Yeah. At NJ Pack Center. Is that what it was? Where we were?
I think it used to be called the East Rutherford, or it had like a branding.
Okay.
But I remember talking to a guy who was setting up stuff on stage. I said, "Wow, you guys are going to Connecticut the next night and coming back here the night after." It was like a weird travel schedule.
Yeah. I think they booked another show. So they, but usually, and One Night Alone live was a tour that I was in the center, in the back of the theater. There's usually always the place for the soundboard, and the tech, and the lighting and stuff like that. On Musicology, I was just to the right of the vomitory where the Zamboni would go in and out. I was always just outside that to the right. It didn't matter where I was there because I should have been able and could have been able to mix it from anywhere in the venue, because we were almost equidistant from every part of the venue. The PA was about the same distance from everything, being in the round, which was an advantage, because that's a disadvantage for sound. You're yelling into every part of a venue at once. But I had the volume under control, and I had a good thing going, so that it made a lot of sense, and it was very intelligible. So we had to iron some things out, but that really worked. And that I think that tour sounded good anywhere you were, which I liked.
Yeah. It was the only thing we were part of the NPG Music Club. We had like front row seats near the stage, and my wife's like, I never saw Renato the whole show because you're so close. But
you're looking at subs.
I mean, you're shaking hands, with Chance and Candy, when they're coming off stage. But yeah, great tour.
Now I know exactly where your seats were, because I know exactly where you were oppositionally to Renato. So you're just like, I think he's over there. I hear him.
I can hear him.
And that's again part of the benefit of being a little ways back,
is
being able to sort of take it in. And even the dynamic of working with artists and bands now, being at front of house, I have a unique advantage of everything is within probably about a 45 degree, depending on how far away I am in stadium. I only mix stadiums now. I have the luxury of mixing all stadiums, sometimes arenas, but usually it's 40 to 70,000 seaters, and everything is within 35 or 40 degrees of I see all the dynamics going. I see what's going on. I have to have binoculars. I'm that far back where I can see when things are happening. Like, okay, here she comes. She's coming to the mic now, or whatever, because they're all speaking in Mandarin. So I have to sort of either go, oh, I think that means, and I can kind of understand more than I can speak, but I can watch the stage. But I have a unique perspective where I'm not wrapped around with the whole dynamic. I'm watching it from afar, so I can see the dynamics happening. But yeah, certainly being back a little ways will let you see every band member and the whole entirety of what's going on physically with the show. And so many shows now have video is such an important part of the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the interstitial video pieces that you want to be back a little ways. You don't want to be looking up at a, 35, 40, 60, 80 foot tall. It just doesn't look right. So I always encourage people to get back a little, take it in.
How about the preparations for the debut, the LA, the Staples, the first night of that tour? We went to the movie theaters. What went into that, and what went wrong? What went
Nothing.
great? Oh, okay. Just
nothing went into it.
Okay.
They let me know very, very, we rehearsed, and then those were the first shows, right? One of the first shows on the tour.
I think so.
I had the mix dialed in at Paisley Park, so I was already set with the mix. And then I think the promoter came to me. I forgot which of the promoter, maybe it was Megland or Gongaware. One of those guys came to me and said, "Hey, by the way, this is going to be in movie theaters all over the nation." I was like, "Cool." And he said, "We're thinking of bringing in a truck and having someone mix it in a truck separately to go to the movie theaters." And I said, "Oh, okay. Like, you better talk to Prince about that." So he asked Prince, and Prince said, no, Scottie's mix, he's mixing it. It's not complete without his, I did all the effects from the record. I did certain harmony effects where Prince would talk in the octave voice, and not the octave. It was like a fifth down. There was some stuff that was a fifth up or a third up. I had all these effects, and none of those wouldn't have been logistically easy for them to take all the inputs separately and my effects. And we just didn't have time. It was like they said, "This is going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen on this night." They said, "Well, we insist. We'll pay for it. We just want to bring in a truck so the mix is good." And Prince is like, "No, Scottie's a band member. He's part of the band. You going to play Renato's keys too?" And they say, "No." And he go, "Cool, then don't play the soundboard. Scottie does the sound." And Prince sort of went to bat for me, and I did nothing different. The only thing they did is add audience ambient mics around the stage, the arena, and kind of add those in. But otherwise, we just approach it like any other gig. And that's what I appreciated about Prince. He played the same show. He reminds me very much of I'm not a Springsteen fan, but I certainly am a fan of him as a performer. I don't take in his music, but I appreciate him very greatly as a performer. And those are two guys who played just as much, just as long, just as well for 3 people as they would for 30,000 people. They played the same show, and nothing's different. So to us, it was just another show. Take that how you want it. It was just one of the Staples Center shows. It was one of the 6 that we played there. And so we didn't treat it different. It's just, they had a stereo output from me that they put in the theaters, and they added some crowd mics, and that's it. It was run and gun, very guerrilla style back then.
Yeah. And definitely profitable touring, and it must be tough. It was a long tour, but Prince was real happy towards the end. Was it? I read something.
I think so.
Yeah. They came in, presented him with the check, his thanks.
Yeah.
Something.
He did say to me on the last day of the tour.
Okay.
Prince came in inordinately early on Musicology. And I had a friend of mine, Janine, a friend of mine, sent me roses on the last day of the, I came to my front house desk and there were roses there. And I said, "Did you send these?" She said, "Yeah, I was just commemorating your last show." And I remember when I got to front of house, I left. And when I got back, Prince was there kind of playing with one rose. He almost looked like he did in Purple. He's holding a rose in the Purple Rain, or that's how he looked. He was spinning a rose around, and then he stuck it back in the vase, and he goes, "We probably should have done this longer, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, probably."
Yeah.
Like I could see that, he was saying goodbye, not only to a lot of money, but to him, it was saying goodbye to a lot of shows, a lot of cities. He said, "We probably did one more time around." I was like, "Yeah, for sure." Because it was only 6 months long. That's not a long tour. All the artists in China and Asia, they tour 3 years. It's a 3-year tour. The commitment is 3 to 5 years on a record. So they'll do 100 or 150 shows, in stadiums over a 3-year period.
Because I was looking at your girl, Jolyn Tsai.
Jolene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw like the tour, and it's
Yeah.
like broken up like 4 years or something like that, right?
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
4-year tour.
right.
And she's gearing up to go out again because she's got a new record out and she's really excited about it. And that you talk about a show. I mean, I wonder, Joe, recently I was thinking about the fact that Prince didn't do anything to click track. He never had click tracks live.
Right.
He never had playback live. He had live loops, and he had Morris and he had Tommy, people playing loop, samples like that, and Renato, but he didn't play anything with time code or click tracks or real playback where there was an arrangement, solid arrangement. That's how every show is done nowadays. Every artist you see is done with almost without exception, is done with time code and click tracks and some form of backing tracks. And that allows lights to be perfect. That allows lasers to be perfect. That allows when Katy Perry's flying through an arena, that's all on time code. That's just done, all those motors, all the motion control is done over time code. So that I always wondered how Prince would have done had he kept progressing and finally given in and just said, all right, fine,
Yeah.
I want perfect lights. Let's just use time code, or let's use this locked arrangements. It's always this arrangement. So let's just, for those songs, let's do it. And then where the lighting engineer can just go like this. Like when I'm mixing now
Yeah.
in China, I'm kind of grooving. I turn around and everybody's there just stoic with headset because they're all watching time code. They're watching what's happening, making
Okay.
sure that that things are locked in. I'm the only one that's really mixing analog, so to speak.
Right. Right. So, before we get into like your later years with Prince and piano and microphone, I got to tell you a condensed One Night Alone box set story, which obviously that's your baby right there. You were heavily involved in all facets of it. But I told you the Montreal show we saw, and I think that was the end of the North American, and you guys had like a 2 or 3 month break before
Yes.
you went to Europe and then Japan.
Yes.
Okay. I get an email. I think it was like beginning of September. Paisley Park wants to see you in the chat room in AOL. So I'm like, okay, I'll go. Some of the names I'm not going to say just to protect their innocence, but you'll get the gist of the story. So I went in there. There's PP3 in there. The person who invited me in leaves. I'm there talking and typing. The first thing someone says to me, "Where did you get the bootleg photos from the Purple Rain tour you gave me to this person?" Somebody who was in his band before. I was like, "What?" It wasn't me. So we're going back and forth. My wife's sitting in a chair there. It's like a 10-minute battle on the keyboards. And I'm saying, it's not me. And the person's saying, we come in peace. Well, do you know where the bootleg suppliers are from Europe? I'm saying, obviously, they got me completely misunderstood. Well, it went back and forth. And the last thing was like, you know where to find us if you want to give us that information. So I called someone from Prince's organization and said, what's going on there? She goes, you know who you were talking to? You're talking to Prince. And the story, what happened was the person who I did an interview with was also on another DJ show a couple weeks after my show. That's where the bootleg stuff came in from that DJ. So the way I'm going to wrap it up as a good story, the Prince being nice and saying, I'm sorry in a roundabout way. You guys were in Japan. I get an email from Paisley Park. It says, can you send us your mailing address? I was like, okay. I get a FedEx package, open it up. It's the One Night Alone box set. And it was like a few days before it was released to radio and the MPG Music Club. I'm the only media outlet who had it. The next day we had to go to Montreal. So that night we're doing shows, loading up the music. People are all into it. How did he get this set?
Yeah, good.
So
That
it's
was good.
almost like
That was a thank you.
that was his thank you for
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
He operated with olive branches. That was what he would do.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just saying, I mean, the one time that he wrote down the words, I'm sorry, you were right. Yeah, I'm sorry, you were right. I was wrong. Like literally in his beautiful handwriting, he apologized for accusing me of doing something to his guitar that I wasn't doing. And he listened back to the tape and he was like, oh, my actual board recording. And he wrote that. And Zachary March said, call me to the outside the dressing room. He said, read this. And he was holding on to it. Read this. And I read it. I was like, wait. And I tried to kind of grab it and pull it. and I'm pulling it. And he's going like this. And he's, and then I was like, oh, and he went, you read it? Anyway, and tore it up. And I said, oh, come on, man. You should have, come on. You should have. And he's like, no, sorry. Years later, which is only say 5-7 years ago.
Right.
After, Prince passed, and then we somehow got in touch. I got in touch with Zachary, and I said, hey, remember when you tore that? He's like, man, I feel so bad about that, man. I should have just given you that note. I know you wouldn't show it around. I was like, yeah, I have a couple of handwritten things that he wrote.
Right.
But otherwise, it's just the photos. The photo behind you there, that Afshin Shahidi was so kind to.
Yeah, that's a great photo.
Afshin, I don't always give credit that I should. Afshin Shahidi was so lovely. He's such a lovely guy. And he, when I left and they knew I was leaving and I had said, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going to go do this. He was like, here's these shots of you and Prince, all these candid shots of you, which I never knew were being taken, obviously, because Afshin was always around. So you kind of never knew. Good photographers disappear into the background. They wear black and they just disappear and you don't know they're there. And at the end of the tour, you go, whoa, I didn't even know they were there. So that was really kind. Afshin, I owe a debt of gratitude, because it's one thing to say, oh, Prince and I, shit, we were tight. We were super cool. Yeah, and it's another to, which I've never said. I just said, here's where I was on these dates and whatever. And then somebody backs you up with, a cool photo like the one behind you, which is we're working together. It's not posed. It's not thought up. It was just two guys working towards something else, on the show. And which is, I'm really proud of that. And that was a really kind gift for Afshin to give me, because he was like, hey, this will be important to you. He kind of saw what it was going to be.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best. I love photos like that where you see not a stage photo. It's just you both didn't know what was on you.
Yeah,
probably.
And Prince, everything he did was stage. He kind of controlled everything from all the sort of looks and everything. So to see even any candid photo of him is kind of a unique treat.
Right. So the musicology tour ends, and then there were some stints you did the residency in Vegas?
I did not.
Oh,
I was asked to do it. I didn't do it. Denny Yeager did that. Denny did a really good job on that. He got a little crap from Prince midway through, I think. They flew me out to, I don't know whether they flew me out to intimidate Denny, but if they did, it didn't work, because I flew out, I checked into the Rio. I asked to meet Denny and we talked, and I said, how's it going? Like, what's going on? And he knew right away he had an advocate in me. Like, I was like, what's happening? How is he doing? And he's like, are you here? Are you like taking over? I was like, no, Prince wants me to hear the sound and make suggestions. I said, but how do you feel? What do you want to change? He's like, well, I'd really like this, and I wanted to do this, and I wish I hadn't done that. I was like, well, let's get it done. So then I remember I recommended to Prince on a sheet of paper before I left, like handwritten, because I didn't have time to type it up and print it. I said, you should do this and this and this. And I kind of said the things that Denny had talked to me over dinner about what he wanted, how he wanted to be supported better. And when you get in the middle of a run like that in Vegas, everything becomes incubated in your mind as far as how you're doing things. And it's harder to change than not. It's hard to revisit, like, hey, let me take a new approach to this. Let me freshen this up. Or maybe we're dealing with people seeing the show a second time. Let me give them this, or try this effect, or let me try something cool during rehearsal and see if Prince bites on it. It's just like fishing. And then if you go like, yeah, do that during the show. Okay, cool. So Denny, I think he did a spectacular job, because when I was there, it sounded great. I don't think anything should have changed, but Denny Prince wanted another set of ears on it. And I was kind enough to a fellow engineer with whom I had more in common than I did with Prince, right? I have more in common with engineers than I do with, other people. We all have a lot in common. We go through the same thing. So it's important to support one another in that sense as well.
Prince's vocals were just amazing throughout his career, and you were a big part of getting it sounding so great. What's your secret to get Prince's vocals cutting through all that's going on stage with the different instruments? Did you have a special technique?
No, I always say I don't have any secrets, because when people want to know, or they email me, cold email me, or how do you do this on my website? I'd say, okay, here's my approach. I tell people exactly the chain through which I go. Prince has first of all, you're dealing with a oh man, I would say untrained but completely technically perfect singer. He knew how to control every register. He knew how to go from there's really kind of technically there's no such thing as like chest voice, head voice. People would argue that there technically isn't. It's
Mhm.
all one voice coming out. It's all the passagios. It's how you get from your gut and your chest into your throat, into your head, into your soft palate. It's into your falsetto. It's those passages between all of those that are really important. Prince's passagios were perfect. He knew how to control his vocal, his timbre, and his volume. He was so good at moving from he's just everything was in your face and everything was as much as it could be with full sensitivity to the material. So he could sing a song like Scandalous or the beginning of the Beautiful Ones and be very small and sensitive but mighty. There was force behind it. So it was he sort of mixed his own vocal in a way. I a lot of times I just kind of got it up and got it out of the way. I happened to know what he was doing through my technical training, so I knew what he was doing to get it, and I was just smart enough to kind of get out of the way. I didn't overly compress Prince. He would tell me just compress the hot stuff, the stuff that's gonna peak out the system and whatever. Although he liked levels really hot, dangerously hot. When you're dealing in a digital desk, they would actually just clip the board and clip is clip in digital, so it would sound terrible. So I always kept away from that. But I compressed him just on the top of his phrases
Mhm.
when he would get into things, really lean into them. Otherwise, he brought it to the mic, uh, unlike anyone else, and his control that. And people argue. I'm jumping lanes a little bit here, but
Right.
I got crap a while back by saying that I thought piano was his greatest instrument. It had come just on the heels of the some of the first interviews I did after he passed, and we were talking about the one night alone. The piano and a microphone.
Right.
So yes, I was sort of in that piano phase in thinking about it. I think he was very expressive and very different on piano. He did things that you, in a Berklee school of music, you
Mhm.
shouldn't do.
Right.
He would do these cluster chords, and he would do these. That's why Lisa Coleman. I think he learned a lot from Lisa Coleman, a ton
Mhm.
on how to and all her experience, and all the jazz that she would listen to, and Bill Evans and stuff like that. So he learned from Lisa. He learned dissonance and harmony from Lisa. You could tell because when she came in his
Mhm.
career sounded differently. Everything compositionally sounded a little different. I think she's the most influential musician with whom Prince ever worked, Lisa Coleman, for sure, in my view. And
Wow.
that's probably backed up, I think, by Eric Leeds, for whom I have a ton of respect as well. So um, Prince had a real command, an unorthodox command of the piano, of the keyed instruments. Guitar, of course, he was amazing.
Yeah.
He's an incredible rhythm player. He was a very good soloist. Not the best, not the most technical. He wasn't as clean as you think, um, but the emotion was there. So what he lacked in absolute precision, he made up for with emotion, and he would sell the emotion as well physically with his body. So he was sort of one with the guitar all the time, and he could always make any guitar sound like him when he was playing it. So
Mhm.
yes, piano. I loved his keys. His guitar speaks for itself, and people are generally right that yes, that was his greatest. But his greatest instrument, I've since then amended it to be his vocal. His vocal was unrivaled. His range, his clarity, his the constitution of his voice. It was in the same shape near the end as it was in the beginning of his career. He never did anything in alternate keys that I know of when I was there, because I always know what key he was in, and I'd be like, oh, B flat. He might be headed for Purple Rain, or I would know where he was going by
Right.
what key he was in. He didn't alter his keys. It was effortless. His falsetto was present and very strong. Prince's that guy's vocal was perfect, and so I had to do less than you think. But it was always about keeping the voice. He didn't call it a vocal; he called it a voice. It was the voice. Keep the voice on top of the mix. So I would always keep the voice on top of the mix. I knew enough to know, and he was like super smart about it. He said, Scotty, here on musicology, my fans are the age where they're now bringing their kids.
Hmm.
We know all the lyrics to all the songs, but their kids don't. So can you have the voice that much higher in the mix for this tour? And I was like, sure. I wrote that down. As I always do, even with you, I'm taking notes on things you say. I wrote down
Hmm.
voice higher in the mix, inordinately higher than I'm used to doing. And Prince probably would have loved. I do sometimes think about him uh, being at front of house when I'm over in China
Uh-huh.
at a show, and I think he would love and be proud of how I'm mixing over there.
Wow.
Not
Yeah.
overly, not too much sub, more impact than pregnant low end just running through the venue. So it's impact with the low end. The space, I mix things spatially so they kind of spread out like a fanning out uh, poker cards. You want to get things in the mix so that they either represent where they are on stage or get
Mhm.
them out of the way. Move vocals around so they support the other vocals if there's harmonies and seconds and thirds and fifths. And then the absolute volume of the lead vocal is where he would love it right now. I just think he would enjoy that, stepping right on stage and playing, because it's right in his wheelhouse is
Yeah.
where he wants to hear it. Yeah.
You brought all that stuff that you guys did together and
That's exactly
pass it
right.
on to
All of it.
another generation.
Paisley Park University. I
Yeah,
didn't get a
that's right.
diploma or a degree,
Right.
but I sort of did, like I
Yeah.
kind of I got a degree in one form or another.
Yeah.
It served me up until this day.
So your website, scottiebaldwin.com?
Yes. Very
Yeah.
archaic.
Yeah.
It is a Squarespace. I think somehow it still says Squarespace Scottie Baldwin. Like I don't know how to get the
Out of it.
the address. Yeah. So I'm archaic in that sense, but I have updated it so that you can see Jolene and JJ's photos and
Right.
Wang Li Home and Ame
Yeah, we'll have
and
the
these
link
artists.
in the description when we're
Great. Yeah.
publishing this.
I'll make sure I update it today before I leave.
Okay. Yeah. No. Just go back. Have a safe trip back to Asia. So,
Well, I just booked another artist after JJ. JJ ends. We end this 3+ year tour
okay.
at Bird's Nest Stadium. Those 9 shows at Bird's Nest, and then I'm home. I come home for a week, and then I go back. I was picked up a woman named Huang Xiaoyun. Huang Xiaoyun is the winner of we would look at as The Voice or American Idol or
Okay.
these voice competitions that we have.
Mm-hmm.
She won The Voice in China.
Okay.
She's got an incredible voice. It's not this whispery, quiet soprano. She is forceful, loud, tons of power, incredible range. She there's some little clip that I just in the middle of the show, I'm watching the show to get familiar with it, and I clicked on this little passage where she hits a super clean C6. Anybody who knows piano and knows vocal, a clean, beautiful C6 is really hard to nail, and it's not whistle register. She doesn't go up into the Mariah Carey stuff, which I think is a party trick. That's a parlor trick. I just think that Rochelle Farrell, Mariah Carey stuff, it's fine if that's your bag and you love it. But I think once you get into whistling, it's like, here's the whistle part. I'm going to throw the whistle.
I held off
in.
taking a sip of the coffee when you were saying that statement. That cracked me up.
Yeah, it's just a part. It's just like, when's she going to do? She's got to do the whistle thing.
Right.
She's got to get. So this artist named Huang Xiaoyun. Huang is her family name. Xiaoyun is her first name. She goes by Ghost. That's her stage name is Ghost. And Ghost, it's going to be really fun. She's a fan of mine and wanted to work with me. She's fans of Wang Li Home and JJ Lin. And she said, I got to have Scottie mix these shows for me. And I'm super excited because she is supremely talented vocalist. And I'm excited to get over there and do those shows with her.
So for the big shows like that, the stadium, are they mostly on the weekend that you have time to recover during the week?
Yeah, it's especially important to me. And when I traveled last year for those 6 months with Joe Lynn, we would do shows Friday and Saturday night. And then Sunday I would fly on the weeks that we didn't have a Sunday show as well. I would fly with the dancers. We're all either from New Zealand or Australia or America. The 16 dancers and 2 travel people and myself would go to the next city. So then we'd be off Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I would just be alone and at this 5-star hotel, just sort of figuring out what I wanted to do, contemplating life and enjoying the China. But unfortunately last year, as this year, it was over 100 every single day I was over there last year in the summer. It's brutal. And I just looked at the weather in Beijing coming up and it's like 101, 103, 101, 98, 99. I'm like, it's oppressive. So
yeah,
I exist a lot in the hotels over there, and I've got a lot to prep for this next Huang Xiaoyun gig, so I have plenty to do. I have plenty to study.
Yeah, I remember being when I was living in Taipei in November one time. It rained 18 straight days. At least
Mm,
part of the day was, but you didn't need heat in the apartment.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It gets really thick over there. You know,
yeah, oh
it's
yeah,
basically tropical. So it just gets brutally thick over there. You have to
right.
really sort of be ready for that.
So I wanted to head into your last project you did with Prince,
Mhm.
the piano microphone tour, which never, unfortunately, on his passing, never went further than it did those dates. But what was the lead up to the two Paisley Park shows? Obviously, you must have been incredibly involved with him getting it set. But
Yeah.
um, did you notice he was any nervous more to just be at the piano and singing than other previous
No.
tours? No.
No, the only thing that he had talked to me in the middle of the Australia run was that his hands hurt a lot. He said because that piano, the Yamaha C7XSH, if I remember correctly, C7XSH, it's a silent grand, so you can disengage the hammers, but you can still get the sound through a sound module. Because miking a grand in a place that's already made to throw the sound of a grand piano out with no amplification
Hmm.
is tricky. So I said, let's just use this silent grand that Yamaha has, and that way we can be really loud and clean. And so he agreed, and I set one up at Paisley Park for him to play, and he loved it. And so I had the same one, but in the middle of he had a brand new one in Australia, and it was I remember the action on it was very heavy.
Hmm.
It wasn't buttery. You know, he
Okay.
sort of liked the soft, buttery action, like this side of neutral. He
Okay.
would go to the soft side of neutral because then he could really do runs. And this was very hard. I remember how hard it was. It had clearly not done. Usually pianos, you want to buy a grand piano if you. This is as an aside here. When you buy a grand piano, you want to buy one that's 3 years old. You want to buy one from a student somewhere, some university that's had, that has 20 grands, and they buy like 3 or 4 every year and they sell 3 or 4 every year. You want to buy one that's been used for a few years because then they've gotten some of their life, they get settled in. Buying a new grand, and I could tell this was a brand new Yamaha C7X SH. So it was very stiff. And he would tell me after the show, he's like, man, I need a day to recover just because it's so painful to play this thing. So it was a very stiff grand. And but we did a show on New Year's Eve 2015, or the eve of 2016,
Hmm.
in St. Bart's with NPG. And as far as I remember, I recall him wanting to do more NPG shows. But when we did this, um, we did the New Year's Eve show, which turned out to be his last show with the NPG.
Right.
And then we did the January, what was it? January 21. Yeah, January 21st, 2016. We did that show, and it was it was so well received by the crowd there at Paisley Park that he immediately switched his focus, and he told Kirk, let's take this on the road. We're going to go, just you, me, and Scotty. Kirk's like, do you want a lighting guy? No. Do you want a this? No. Do you want, nope, just no lights, just a few lights, and put some, project some psychedelics on me and on the back
Right.
screen, and I'll just do a straight show, just no tricks. Kirk was like, cool. It was easy for us to put together. um, but and we had a good support team in Australia. However, uh, I mean, we quickly found out that, that I found out that he was flipped over, as I say. Something was clearly wrong with it, with how he was adjusting. I liken it mostly to the time I went over a week before the show started,
Oh, okay.
picked out
Yeah.
the system, got things set up, told him, pick the piano, chose got all the stuff set. So I was over there for 6, 7 days, I remember. And Prince like basically landed and had a show the next day. So he clearly was jet lagged, clearly was not in a condition. Now we know he was in an altered condition,
Right.
which the behavior he had was pretty typical. His Prince's normal behavior was not typical anyway. So people always say, well, come on, you should have, for sure you saw signs. I was like, no, his behavior was often that strange and that, alternate to what you think would be going on. And so he was just like, one night he would have one show, it'd be great. And he would squeeze my arm on the way out of the venue and say, sounds great, leave it just like it is. And I go, cool. And the next day he would do that. show, the first show the next day, to go great. And then he'd come out, and after the second show, he'd have a good first show. After the second show, he'd go, whatever you changed, put it back. And I was like, well, I didn't change anything. I was just doing vocal effect. Like, it's a piano and a microphone. I was like really mixing anything. And he just, that obviously that was just, he was really either tired, worn out, on pills, whatever it was that put him in that condition, where it started being difficult to find the artistry in it. The shows were still all great. The only show I remember him having any sort of hesitancy and the pacing, the rhythm was off, was the one where he found out that Denise had that Vanity had
Yeah.
died.
Right.
Yeah. When Denise died, that was not a great show. And there were more pregnant pauses between things, and he seemed to be more contemplative during the show. And that's the one where he immediately came over to my laptop, stood there and said, erase that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I double clicked on the show, double clicked on the drive, double clicked on that, clicked on that show. And he said, all right, erase it. And you heard the little trash sound, it went,
Yeah.
and then he said, now delete your trash.
Oh,
and I said,
okay.
Shift command delete.
Right.
And it went, and that sound happened again. I was like, that's gone. Wow. It's like really gone.
Yeah.
I mean, IT people will tell you, oh, it wasn't really gone,
right,
but
right.
It was gone as far as I was able to retrieve it. So I just thought, well, he just didn't want that show, I guess. So that's the only show missing out of all the recordings that I did. That was absent, like that was the one where Vanity died. So he didn't want to remember that, apparently. So
what was the last show you did on that tour?
It was in Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
We had a particularly tough couple of days where the only thing I can liken it to your listeners and to anyone taking this in, it's as if you left your computer right where you left it on your desk, and you went to bed, and the next day you came in and you said, who moved my computer? And you'd say to your spouse, why did you move my computer? And they'd say, I didn't move. I wasn't even in your office. You mean that computer? Yeah, you moved my computer. I didn't move your computer. I wasn't even in your office. You're a liar. You're lying to me. You moved my computer. Why would you move my computer? It's not even your computer. And you would just go, what are you talking about? That was how bad it was, where he would say, you changed a lot of stuff. And I go, I didn't change anything. I haven't touched anything. And then I said, I literally at the end of the show, I muted it, and then came in today, unmuted it, snapped in front of your microphone to make sure it worked, pressed one key to make sure it worked. And he said, well, see, you muted it. So you did change something. So you are lying to me. And I would go, it was just like this dizzying array of, and the other thing is I had other things to do. I was on a big project in LA with Greg Fillinganes and a bunch of great musicians out there. And I was like, maybe I should just go back to that, thinking I would just leave. So he had a next gig in Perth. So I called frankly, I just told Kirk, I was like, I'm out. I'm changing my flight. I'm going to go home tomorrow. He's like, what? Don't do it, man. Don't leave me out here. And I was like, hey, sorry, man. And I called the sound company, told the promoter, get 2 sound engineers in Perth. Get 2 there. I don't care. Get 2 warm bodies. They can be 2 people from your company. Just get 2 people that say they're the engineers, and he can choose one of the 2 and get it done. And I had already done all the prep work and done all the meetings for the in the round Perth gig. So I felt it was well at hand. I left them my iPod with all the walking music. I left them instructions written down on when to play the last song before he walked on. Like, I left it in good shape.
Right.
But I got out of there thinking that Joe, that like in a few months he'd call and say, can you come out and mix this thing? And that we would sort of make up the way we had before. It wasn't, I didn't worship him, and I didn't worship, he more than one occasion, he complained that band members were always bugging him to know when they were going to go play more shows. Well, I never had that problem. He didn't like that pressure. I didn't have that problem because I would leave and go do other tours with artists that were bigger than him, which created some sort of weird attraction of getting someone back, right? It's just this weird sort of dynamic. And so I would go do Madonna and then come back. Or I would leave and go do, I would do other things, do Gaga and then come back. And then, artists that were having more success than Prince. So it was quite, I just didn't I just felt like, okay, it's time for me to leave. I wasn't some big proclamatory statement of, like, I'm done
Yeah.
here. And like,
And flip
it was
the
like,
council over.
yeah, I've licked I would just said, I said, I think the show, and then subsequent emails right up until his death. God, I think the last time we emailed was exactly a week before he died. Um, and so I said, hey, I left you in good shape. You still owe me money. You should do the honorable thing and pay me. I left you in good shape on that tour. I didn't take anything for granted. I set you up for continued success. And that was generally not how he was feeling right then. So, but I have to respect that. I respect, that he was upset that I took off, seemingly leaving him high and dry, but he had good success in Perth. Apparently the shows went well. And then he came back and started touring in the US. I think he
Yeah.
started in
I think he
Oakland
did a
or,
couple in Canada,
San Francisco.
Montreal and
Yeah.
Toronto.
So, yeah, he did some shows over there. And frankly, I wasn't paying attention to those because once I had moved on, I started doing these other things. And I went back to whatever artist I was with. I forgot actually who I was with then, that I went back to them and just went right back to what I was doing. So, so it was it. And then when he died, it was like, wow, that was kind of it was a surprise. And that wasn't very pleasant, but I still, everyone has, as I've said before, nobody owns the grieving process. We all grieve in a different way.
Right.
I really feel bad mostly for his fans, because when you feel that close to an artist and you feel like they are speaking what you're feeling, that's a really, that's a privilege that Prince received from the fans, for them to let him into them that far. I always think it's that the fans are the top of the pyramid, and it gets smaller as it goes down. Hopefully the artist is at the bottom of the pyramid, the fans are at the top in the wide way, upside down pyramid. And Prince fans really, I felt really bad for the fans because they lost someone who was a voice. I mean, think of all the cool things that he would have had to say about, because he never knew Donald Trump was president.
Right.
Isn't that a trip?
And he
never
wrote a
knew
song about
COVID.
it.
Yeah.
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 Donald Trump black version.
The black version of him,
Yeah.
at least. So it's he never knew Trump was president. He didn't know about George Floyd. He would have definitely had something to say about that. He would have had a lot of cool things to say. We can kind of guess what he would say based on those things, based on his track record. And I'm sure AI would come up with a very accurate, apt description of what he would have said about each of these things. But the problem is it didn't have his music to go along with it. And he was such an outstanding musician and had such, because he was untrained and he didn't read music. I think that in a sense gave him a huge advantage, because then he wasn't, he wasn't on trammeled ground. He wasn't operating on worn ground already. He always did his own thing, did it his way.
Oh, the piano microphone shows. I'm sure you hear it all the time, pleading, when are they going to be released? And have you got any feelers from the estate?
No. When other people were in charge of it, not Londell and Spicer, but before that, the leadership before that said, hey, I got a call at some point from some woman who said, hey, when we're ready to do this, are you, you're really one of the few, Kirk and myself, we're kind of the only two voices that can talk about that recording, at least the Paisley Park version of it, which is the best. I was at all the piano shows before I left. So I could tell you that was the most connected and the most autobiographical show he did. And it certainly should be released. I think it would be really, it would be beneficial for fans to help add closure to their affair with him and his music. And I think it should be released. So they said, hey, are you in? And I was like, of course, absolutely. And multiple times on January 20th, when we were talking about how to, the next day and mixing that show, we had a several hour meeting alone at the piano. And I said, well, what, I remember specifically saying on the song, Something in the Water Does Not Compute, he's got a doubler echo effect on his voice. And I was like, do you want me to put that on, from the record on there just to, and he said, Scottie, you're producing this thing. You're the producer, produce. Like, you make the decisions. I don't want to decide everything. And I was like, cool. So he had said that multiple times. You're the producer, produce. And so just the idea of it being released gets me excited, because it's something that I could take like a real production credit. Say, yeah, I produced. I didn't just mix and record it. I produced. I helped produce this. I helped get him into that frame of mind to be able to give that echo at the beginning. He said, I want something crazy. And I said, how about the echo I used from the musicology tour on your guitar on a Whole Lot of Love? And he was like, he shook his head. And I said, I grabbed the mic and on the 20th, and I said, check.
Right.
And he was like, cool. Yeah.
Use
Can you
that.
put that on my voice? Yeah. And I put that on his voice, and he started to sing, whoa, 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 whoa. And then he started to play around that. And he said, cool, let's open the show with that. And don't take it off my voice. No matter what I say, don't take it off my voice until I start playing the Batman theme. And I said, cool. And that meant don't take it off his voice, no matter what he says, until you hear the Batman theme. Because that guy never forgot what he was doing. Okay. So the point to which he remembered certain specific what tracks things would be on when you go in the vault and get sounds off the tapes. Like that's on track 16 on that song. You're like, how did you, like, he was a machine like that. So I just left it on his voice until he started playing, and then I pulled it off, and then he started singing. So in a sense, I was a producer on that. I was helping him decide what to do, and I'd be excited for that to get out. And I'm really proud of that work, and I'm equally excited for fans to someday hear that. And I think those guys out there are smart enough to know that they'll, for the legacy, especially in light of canceling the documentary.
Right.
That's 9 hours of an award-winning documentarian that is producing his best effort to get to know Prince better as an artist and as a person. And if that's not going to come out, I think it will someday, by the way.
Did you get contacted for that?
Oh yeah. I did 13 plus hours of pre-interview. And then I think I did like 5 on camera.
Oh, wow. That's pretty extensive.
And so, well, they kind of wanted to center everything around that concert, around piano and microphone concert. That was going to be one of the anchor points. So that's how it was described to me. And Ezra couldn't have been nicer, and his producer tomorrow couldn't have been better. That's an important piece of art that hopefully will get out there so people can know Prince better. But certainly the piano and microphone show of January 21, 2016, it would be great for that to come out just for fans. I think they would really enjoy what he was saying and they would get into him a little bit deeper and understand him a little more right before the end. So I'm hoping for their sake and for everyone's sake that comes out.
You got to get your liner note skills back for that.
Yeah. Freshen that up.
Yeah, that's right. Because like you said, you and Kirk, the only ones who are really privy to the whole experience.
Yeah. And I have most of that is just, on occasion, my wife will say, like, you should write some of these things down. I've got them so fresh in my mind, some of because I was always, I'll say this about Prince, and that I don't think I've felt this way about I haven't felt this way about any other artist, that I was always really frosty when Prince was around. Meaning I was always ready to go. Like, he's ready to work. He's ready to do a show. He's ready. I was always like a firefighter. I think maybe Greg Boyer is the one who described it as being a firefighter. And that's the only other person I heard describe. I've always described.
Shelby J said something like that too to me one time.
Same.
Kind of similar. She always kept her shoes by the door with a bag packed.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it too. You just you throw it on, zip it up, jump down the pole, and you're on. You're going. We're doing an after show. We are. Oh yeah, we are. Then fax that over or email it over the input list. Have them check everything. I had a whole list of things for the local sound company person to do at the venue. Check all these things, then have them at 0. I'll come in and I'll just start recording with my DAT, and then we'll go. Like, it was ready to go. And there was a frostiness to that I really do miss. Everything now is so planned out. It's almost never without a net.
Right.
It's like you want to, sometimes there are places to explore as an artist out there without a net. When there's no net to catch you. I think less so as an engineer. I want to have backup systems in place and backup plans, but it was fun. Those after shows were fun because there was just never a plan. There was never a backup. We just did whatever we wanted as however long we wanted. And I always knew he was having the best time at the after shows. The more he would say, turn it up, Scotty, when he referenced me during those, I knew he was having that's when he was having a ball and really having a good time.
And he referenced you during piano and microphone as well.
Yeah. That was really sweet too.
Yeah. And he took his time. Yeah.
As I say, it's one thing it's as if like, oh, Joe Kelley's a friend of mine and I'm a famous painter. I'm going to paint this painting and I'm going to put a little picture of Joe Kelley in the lower part. People don't do that. They don't put
Right.
your picture in a painting. They don't write your name in their story. But Prince was playing music and he thanked me while he was playing music. And that's insertion into someone's art. I don't overlook how important that is, or I have a lot of gratitude that someone of his caliber would think enough of that was like a high compliment to thank me and think about me during a show, because he thought about how the sound sounded. And he was right in that pocket of where he felt like he was at front of house, but he was also speaking with 1,000 or 1,500 of his closest fans. And, so that I don't take that for granted. I appreciate that very much. And I think over the years, if I was salty early,
Mm-hmm.
you could go back and listen to interviews that I don't think I did any interviews until 2017, maybe 2018 or something.
Okay.
Excuse me. But if I was salty at all in any of those, it was probably because I was going through my own process of getting over things. And I just can't say enough about how much inspiration I've gotten and how much I continue to get, because I can hear him in my ear, and I do. I like, snare's too boxy. I can hear him saying, snare's too boxy. And I'm like, oh God, you're right, man. I mean, I probably look like I'm mumbling out there at front of house in China because I don't have anyone with whom to speak English anyway. So then I'm out there going, okay, man, yeah, you're right. And I'm cleaning up the snare a little bit, but certainly he taught me a new way of doing sound, and I kind of learned the guerrilla style, but then I've refined my sensibilities, and I've really polished it up where it's as good as anyone in the industry. And a sensitivity to the music and what it means, and not getting too bogged down in all the technicality where you're just devoid of any contact with the feel of the music, and you're just sitting out there, standing there with devoid of any emotion or feeling like you're passing through this energy to the crowd. You should feel that. You should I think that the best that I see do it are always ones that kind of still pass that energy through and not forget, even though I'm in my late 50s, to pass that energy through to a crowd that wants it. And people respond in kind. They understand when you're doing that, when you're doing your best for someone and their favorite artist.
I got to ask you a quick question. The last question before I forget, it just came to my head. When Prince did that Nokia Theater out in LA, and
yes,
he was like calling out the sound, and I never seen like calling out the venue and stuff like that. What was that about? You weren't doing that gig, right?
no, I wasn't. And that was, when was that? I don't remember who was.
2007 or.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to name them by name.
Yeah, no.
I always know when I was.
I just never saw like, I was like, what's going on here? Yeah.
Oh no. He told me at one point that he played, I'm pretty sure, United Center in Chicago.
Oh, I heard
at some
about
point
that.
in his career.
Morris Hayes kind
And
of talked about that. Yeah.
It was so bad that he took out an ad in the paper the next day, or he made the promoter take out an ad, said, "We're responsible," and like named people. And it was really ugly. And I was fortunate enough to never have anything that like that magnitude happen where I got called out by name for something that bad. Prince, certainly he and I had a running joke about monitor engineers. We just never found any that we thought were amazing. Gordon Mack was really good. But he was more of a front of house engineer that was doing monitors. And when Prince got rid of him, I got upset, and Prince and I got in a fight, an argument over that, because Gordon was really good and Sean Sturge was really good and Jimmy Corbin was really good. He had a few really good engineers doing monitors, but don't tell him that, because he would just say, no, they're all just the best of the worst, just like they're just the top of the worst. So he just never liked monitor engineers. He just had it in for him. And so we had our jokes, and we had our sort of our, like, well, okay. I knew when he wanted them replaced, and he would have like a code word or something. And then I would just sort of call the sound company and say, send somebody else out. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to that LA gig. I think he was calling out the venue, actually, or the promoter, more than the engineer. But
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't, I hear about it ancillarily or in an ancillary way. But I don't go seek that stuff anymore.
Right.
As the same way, and I never have, the same way. I'm not on social anymore.
Right.
And there's sort of this weird thing. It's not it just sort of released from me as I got off Instagram. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Delete your account or suspend? Delete. Are you sure? Yes. Oh my God. Yes. And finally, when it goes away and the account's bare and gone, it's like, oh, I don't have to figure out like, oh my God, I just spent 2 hours doing this, just losing time. I really appreciate my time a lot more. And that same kind of thing, when I leave a gig or I leave an artist, I don't think about that anymore. It's not something I really think about anymore. It's fun to think about Prince because his time is now gone, and I can, in some small way, add to his fans' understanding of his legacy.
Right.
And I think that's important to be really to be candid and be honest and very truthful about his, not only the high points but the low points, because there are ways of coming to terms with those and understanding that artist. And it's important to know them for their frailties and their bad as well as their good. That's why I think they should release this documentary. It doesn't matter what's in the documentary. We want to know more about that because it helps us get closer to that person and that artist. And artists are, was it told? No, it was Picasso said, art is a lie that tells us the truth. And I love that because every song is fake. Everything is made up. Every painting is just a painting, but they tell us more about the truth in ourselves. And when you get an artist, not just a good artist, a great artist like Prince, they not only have their art, but they're also igniting in you who you are as being black or white, straight or gay, right? And your understanding of the world and your empathy and sympathy for people. And so Prince is super important. And that's why I will always continue to, it doesn't really do me benefit to talk about him except for his fans, and their understanding and having people understand the gravity of what a great artist he was.
Well, Scottie, hey, got to thank you for being so generous with your time, and always wanted to talk with you.
Sorry, I talk so much.
No. This is the kind of guests I love. Somewhat. And
I didn't even have a second.
What's that?
A second cappuccino. I was like, okay, do I make another Americano? Or just no. I'm going to be too chatty, and I'm always too chatty.
What happens if you have to pee when you're doing a show? Speaking of coffee,
you just don't.
Oh, okay.
You don't.
All right.
I always just go right before the show.
Okay, you got to train yourself.
You got to train yourself, and it's funny because all the shows in China are the artists. Every show is 3+ hours. Every show.
Yeah.
306, 312, 301. They're always over 3 hours. And so I've got to be ready, and it's long. And JJ gets in a car and drives around, a piano car, and drives around the stadium in front of the PA for 40 minutes. So that's fun. There's a 40-minute break that I have to keep mixing, but
right.
The band can go off,
right?
And I have to stay focused as he goes behind me and around me. So it's just training. It's all those years of training.
Well, yeah.
Little sips, Joe. Little sips. Little sips. Don't guzzle. Just
right.
Just wet the old whistle.
That's it. Wet the old whistle. Wow. We're aging ourselves with the talk like that.
That's exactly right.
So, hey, Scottie,
I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
I've always wanted to have you on. I didn't want to bug you all these years. So, but I appreciate it. And I know our viewers and listeners they'd be so excited. They'll dig into everything you say. That's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully people take it in kind and know where the intention is, not only with me, but everyone who speaks about Prince, because that's the thing is Prince isn't here to defend himself.
Yeah.
So that's important to remember. He's not here to say, oh, that's wrong. Or, come on, Scottie, that's not what happened. Right. So people have to rely on our accounts as being true and accurate and as real as possible, because that is our words now are part of the, cementing that legacy together for the future. So I always want to make sure I'm accurate and honest, and hopefully people will see that and appreciate it.
Well, I got to wish you success on the new tour with Ghost, right? Coming up.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Enjoy the time with the family in the next couple of days and have a safe trip. All the way to the East.
That's right. Thanks, Joe.
I appreciate it. Scottie Baldwin, thanks so much. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.